No, none at this moment. That's fine. We go to the minute of the executive held on the 17th of January. Can we agree that as a true record? Are there any particular matters of arising that are not contained within the agenda MD requires an update on? No. Here we move to item 4, which is the rolling action log, and I'll go to Mr. Moody to take us through that.
Yes, thank you, Convener. And as usual, the rolling action log contains the outstanding actions where reports are anticipated by the executive, and where the reports are not available, where this should be the due date, there are comments available to explain any delay within that. But the rolling action log is also available for members to ask questions on the items.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moody. Are there any questions in relation to the rolling action log? No. Okay, moving into our substantive agenda, and the first item is around the Fourth Greenport, and it is Mr. Kertrick that's going to take that one.
It is myself, Convener. Good morning. The purpose of the report is to advise Council Executive of the success of the Fourth Freeport bid and to inform of the implications for Falkirk Council and approve the Council's proposed role in taking forward the bid. Members should recognise that the formation of the Fourth Freeport is at an early stage with outline business case, full business case, operating company establishment and the statutory instruments all to be considered, developed and progressed and approved before it is fully operational in 2024. It should be noted that this report has been prepared in the absence of finalised guidance from both the UK and Scottish Government, which is currently awaited. The anticipated benefits of the Fourth Freeport are significant and are outlined in the report and include over 50,000 direct and indirect supply chain jobs, a focus on local well-paid jobs with higher than average current salaries, and approximately £300 million is projected to be invested in infrastructure from generated non-domestic rates. Employers in the Fourth Freeport will commit to upholding the principles of fair work first, and this will be reflected in the Fourth Freeport investment principles. And there is a number of areas that are outlined in the report in relation to work practices. Fourth Freeport is a private sector led programme which includes Forth Ports, Ineos, Babcock, Scarborough Muir and Edinburgh Airport amongst others, and has had input from officers at the 3 local authorities affected, which are ourselves at Falkirk, Fife and the City of Edinburgh. The draft governance structure which is proposed is outlined in Appendix 1. It is proposed that Falkirk Council becomes the accountable body for Fourth Freeport, due to Grangemouth being the largest of the tax sites and the synergies and experience the Council has with tax increment finance, which also involves the accrual and investment of non-domestic rates and infrastructure. There are considerable benefits to the Council in being the accountable body, which includes alignment with our growth deal and levelling up funds, and allows us to develop capacity on business case development to Green Book standards, which is currently undertaken largely by external consultants. The main responsibilities as accountable body include managing the public money that comes to the Fourth Freeport, ensuring that governance arrangements reflect public sector legal obligations and ensures that there is public sector leadership involved in the programme. The costs associated with staff and resources for the accountable body remit are fully recoverable, and initial enabling funds as outlined in the report will be forthcoming. On the actual boundaries of the Fourth Freeport, these are shown in Appendix 2, and the illustration shows both the tax sites and the wider outer boundary. The wider outer boundary is the area where the Council may in the future consider the allocation of investment funds that accrue from the non-domestic rates. And that would be a decision for a future Council to consider. In order to continue the Council's involvement and to progress our role, Council Executive is asked to instruct officers to continue to progress the outline business case and full business case, delegates authority to the Chief Executive or his nominees to sign off and submit the final outline business case and full business case to both governments for approval, and agrees that Falkirk Council should be the accountable body. We also are seeking agreement that Falkirk Council enters into arrangements with both Fife and the City of Edinburgh councils to work collaboratively on Green Freeport proposals. And finally, we delegate authority to the Chief Executive to progress with the other authorities and partners on arrangements for the Council's role in the Green Freeport's governance structure, and to consider the alignment of those with the appropriate Council governance arrangements. And finally, Convener agrees that a future report on the proposed governance arrangements for the Council's role in the Green Freeport's governance structure will be forthcoming in due course. In conclusion, the successful bid of the 4th Green Freeport provides Falkirk Council a unique opportunity to advance our economic priorities, and by being asked to be the accountable body, this puts us in a unique position to be able to influence the future direction of the Green Freeport on behalf of our communities. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kentrick. Also should be noted that there was a couple of all-member briefings which were very well attended by members on more than one occasion, and it would be helpful not to repeat all the questions that were asked at the briefings and remain pertinent to the actual report today. But I'll go to Councillor Garner to move the report.
Thank you, Convener. And I'd like to thank Paul and indeed Laura, not only for this report, but members' briefings and answering the many pertinent questions that you just mentioned. As outlined in the report, following competitive submissions by a number of locations around Scotland, including Glasgow and Aberdeen, I'm happy to say that 4th Green Freeport was one of the 2 successful locations shortlisted by the UK and Scottish Government to progress. 4th Green Freeport is private sector led and has input from officers at Falkirk, Fife and City of Edinburgh councils. The benefits, as mentioned, of the 4th Green Freeport will be fully developed as the business case progresses. However, initial indications are that over the partnership area, over 50,000 jobs, with 20,000 of those from operations in Grangemouth and indirectly through supply chains being delivered over the next 20 years. There will be a dedicated skill fund for local people to gain the skills to access them, and these jobs will be quality, well paid and sustainable. Analysis of the direct jobs created by FGFP shows that the wages provided for these jobs will be significantly higher than the median wage in each region, by 23% in Falkirk area, for instance. The FGP bid will allow retained businesses rates from tax sites in Falkirk, Fife and City of Edinburgh Council to be invested by the councils. Initial estimates are that this could be unlocking the region of 300 million in capital infrastructure projects within the outer boundary area. These projects will be identified and will include investment in transport, town centres and public realm to the benefit of the FGFP communities. The next stage of the progress is the outlined business case and the broad timeline for completion and approval to move to FBC. It is to be agreed that this is likely to be autumn 2023. The full business case will be early 2024, and the summer of 2024 it is hoped that the FGFP will be established and operational. In developing the bid, partners have taken on board concerns raised from previous iterations of Freeports and enterprise zones relating to displacement of jobs from other areas, opportunities for local job seekers, benefits for communities and social impact security, trafficking, avoidance of criminal activities and fair work principles. The FGFP model of operation will consider these and seek to alleviate these concerns. At an operational body, as mentioned, it has been proposed that Falkirk Council becomes the accountable body for the 4th Green Freeport. Main responsibilities include managing and being accountable for public money, participation in the Green Freeport governance arrangements, liaising with government and providing public sector leadership. Although the smaller authority of the 3, Falkirk Council is best placed to take on the accountable body role because the largest of the tax sites areas will be at Grangemouth. In addition, our area is at the highest state of readiness for development, and so initial progress will be most evident locally. Also, Falkirk Council has experience of operating the Tax Incremental Fund Finance (TIF) scheme, which involves similar collection, accounting and deployment of ring-fenced non-domestic rates revenues. All costs associated with being the accountable body are recoverable. In conclusion, the successful bid for a 4th Green Freeport provides us with a unique opportunity to advance our net zero and economic priorities. It closely aligns with Falkirk Growth Deal and other large investments such as the TIF, working closely with neighbouring authorities in Fife and Edinburgh and key industrial partners. we can take steps to preserve an industrial base in Scotland focused on bringing forward the net zero technology that will meet the challenges of the climate emergency. It provides an opportunity to replace and transform declining traditional industries and offers the opportunity to ensure that our industrial complexes remain viable and that there are high-paid jobs and apprenticeships available for local people. Falkirk Council, as I say, has been asked to lead and be lead accountable body for the Green Freeport bid, and this puts us in a unique position to be able to influence the future direction of the Green Freeport on behalf of the communities we represent. Happy to agree the recommendations, noting, as Paul said, point 6 agrees a future report governance structure will be forthcoming. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Garner. I'm happy to formally second. I think it, again, the Greenport and the proposal as Falkirk as the lead and having the most state of readiness of the sites, but also the potential greatest benefit to come to the Falkirk area is hugely positive for us, and it also reflects the very strong economic partnership that we have between public, private and indeed academia within this area, and we need to be mindful that this is a private sector led project, but we are very much part of that going forward, and just the breadth of the types of jobs that are going to be available and developed through this gives some real opportunities for local people. So I think it's a tremendous opportunity to have the Greenport within our area, but also to have the opportunity to be able to shape what the Greenport would be like for Scotland as well as a whole going forward. I've got Councillor Spears first.
Thank you. As the local member for Grangemouth, and I would imagine the town that will be the most greatly affected, I have great pleasure in being part of taking this bid forward. And hopefully some of our past plans, like roll-on, roll-off ferries and making it a deep water port so cruise ships can come in, etc., and hopefully get our lorry parking problem sorted out at the same time. However, I'm concerned that we have not moved forward on the last big project for the area, the flood prevention scheme. It's become a bit of a hobby horse of mine, but there'll be no Freeport bid if the place is flooded. So we really need to concentrate on putting our area in order to be prepared for what is to come if this bid is successful. Can I ask for an update on that, please?
I don't think it'd be appropriate to have a full update in relation to the flood prevention, Grangemouth flood prevention scheme, because it is quite extensive at this meeting. But I do believe that there has been a number of meetings and regular updates and community work. So I don't know if you maybe could just say when there's likely to be an update available for members.
Thank you, Convener. Just to rest assured that the Grangemouth flood protection scheme is high in the partnership's mind in terms of the 4th Green Freeport. In terms of the next update, the intention is that by the summer we will be at notification stage to Scottish Government, and there'll be an update report provided in advance of that submission being made. But there is regular updates from the team that are working on the scheme. It's still advancing. There's a lot of site investigations ongoing. There is still some minor design development work ongoing. They're now mapping out land acquisitions and things like that. And once we get to notification stage, there will be an update report provided.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Keswick. Councillor
Just
Bunty.
respond to that, if that's okay.
But I'm sorry, Councillor Spears.
Sorry, I've asked a question. I've
I'm
been
sorry,
given an
but
answer. I'd like to respond to
Councillor
that.
Spears, the flood prevention scheme is not the subject of this report. It's a Greenport.
I understand your concern.
Thank you. Councillor Bundy.
Thank you, Convener. When this bid was being processed, many of my friends who don't live in the local area asked why Grangemouth, but the answer is clear. Since the opening of the Forth and Clyde Canal, Grangemouth has been the beating heart of the Scottish economy. With high tariffs in Leith and prosperous manufacturing in the wider Falkirk area, the port of Grangemouth quickly became the place that connected Scotland with continental Europe. Grangemouth's economic strength was enhanced in the 20th century with the introduction of the refinery, picked because of the prosperous port and the flat lands. And whilst I cannot give a full history lesson, regretfully for me, but probably to your relief, The conclusion is clear. When Grangemouth is prosperous, Scotland and the United Kingdom is prosperous. But with oil and gas being a finite resource, it is important that we take the initiative to protect and strengthen manufacturing in Grangemouth, to protect and create local high-skilled and high-paid jobs, to ensure that Grangemouth and Scotland's economies are self-resilient, not only for now, but for generations to come, to maintain Grangemouth's role as the beating heart of Scotland's economy. The granting of Freeport status is our taking this initiative. It will see investments of billions of pounds directly come into Grangemouth. It will see Grangemouth be at the forefront of research and development of green technology, driving sustainable economic growth. It will see the training and employment of local people in the local area. But whilst economic prosperity is a sound aim, it cannot be our sole aim. Economic growth cannot come at the expense of the things that the people in our community love. Falkirk Council has a responsibility to use our seat at the table to champion the things that people in our community love. One of these things is our town centres, and as Councillor Gardner pointed out in his contribution, part of this growth deal of the Freeport is injections of investment into our town centres. These deals, these projects into our town centres must be community-led, worked with the community and businesses based in the community. They must be put forward in the community's best interests. Economic growth should support and empower our communities. Our communities should not be forgotten in the pursuit of economic growth. Finally, the creation of opportunities for skills and developments and local employment should be open to everyone. Therefore, I'm deeply concerned that in section 8 of the report, the equality section, it says, and I quote, "Access to funding for skills bursaries will be prioritised for women through preferential scoring and application." This is not equality. It's another speech, but true equality is to make changes in our education system that gives everyone, man or woman, an equal opportunity to participate in STEM subjects. It is not to give women preference in access to funding for skills bursaries. Men who have worked hard and earned the qualifications should not be discriminated against. The best person for the job, for the training, should be offered the job or the training. Ports is an exciting opportunity for Grangemouth, the wider Falkirk area, Scotland and the United Kingdom. It shows the opportunities that can open when the UK and Scottish governments work together for the common good. Let's take advantage of this opportunity to create high-skilled, high-paid local jobs by ensuring that these opportunities are open to all and that economic gains strengthen our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate, obviously, the Greenport. There was an extensive report on the benefits to the environment of the Freeport. Are there no negative climate impacts? Just there's nothing included in the environmental impact about shipping or transport. There's a brief mention of industrialisation, and I'm wondering why that was not covered in the environmental impact.
Okay, Mr. Keswick.
Yes, so the overall carbon emissions from the Green Freeport area, it represents 33% of Scotland's emissions for the Falkirk area, Grangemouth. 40% overall is within that area, including fourth in Edinburgh. We have the highest emissions per capita, and basically the interventions we're making will reduce it, even with increased volumes coming through the terminals and things like that. So the net impact is that there will be a benefit. We can certainly get more information on that from the business case if that would support elected members. But clearly, as we've tried to highlight, without a credible plan and Forth Freeport's forming part of that, there is no way we can achieve the 2045 zero target. So that's a net effect, and if you know that we would have.
Whilst I do appreciate that, I think, you know, it was 2019 when we declared the climate emergency, and I think it was then that they decided that that's when the environmental impact report should come forward for every report coming to council. So yeah, it's a little disappointing that it's only really looking at one aspect in this report. I think to make any informed decision moving forward, we should be covering all our bases and bringing all the information to the table.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, Convener. Well, obviously we are looking forward to some benefits coming from this, the Freeport's approach. We're also very concerned, I think, about the possible implications. And thank you to officers for the fairly well balanced report in terms of looking at some of the dangers and some of the risks that there are. And I think one of the advantages, I hope, of Falkirk being the lead authority will be ensuring that we try to ensure that those risks don't come to fruition. There was one particular risk that's not mentioned. Human trafficking as an issue has been raised, but the other thing, because any situation that makes importation generally easier, there are also dangers in terms of drug importation, and we have drug smuggling rather than importation. I apologise. And I noticed that the equality impact assessment actually says that there are no implications for IJB or NHS. I think that needs to be looked at again, because it would seem to me that just as there are dangers in terms of human trafficking, there are dangers in terms of drug trafficking as well. And I would like the officers to go back and look at that and give us some update on that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hannah. Mr Kettrick, I don't know whether you want to make any comment, and particularly around the team that are working very well around trading standards at the port at the moment.
Yes, I think there's a misconception in terms of Freeports. The regulation in terms of imports coming in does not mean that cargoes being brought in are not checked, and there is still the robust UK border controls and activities that take place. Yes, there will be an increase in volume of cargo coming in. That does not mean it's not checked. The deregulation part is in relation to the tax elements, in relation to the paperwork and the bureaucracy for imports and exports going out. It does not mean that criminal activity is not high in the priority. In fact, I would actually suggest that there's probably a greater focus within those controlled zones of a green Freeport to tackle those issues, particularly with permanent border control staff, as opposed to some of the smaller ports where that is not the case. So I don't see that as being an overriding concern. Certainly something I know that colleagues at Forth Ports would be keen to explore, but I don't see that as being a major issue for us in terms of the governance and management of the Green Freeport.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nimmo.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Like Councillor Spears, I'm a councillor for the Grangemouth area as well, and I have serious concerns regarding the Freeport proposals. Falkirk Council is the lead local authority in this respect. I think you've got to ask yourself, what does this actually mean? Elected members will have no control over any decisions in respect of what's going forward here. There'll be no local accountability whatsoever. It has been mentioned at the two seminars that there will be one councillor from each local authority appointed to the new 12-person board. As far as I'm concerned, that's just a token gesture. That doesn't help with the accountability side of things whatsoever. It's private sector led, obviously. And there has to be a conflict of interest there for all these companies that are going to be involved here, because they have to generate profits for their shareholders. So there is a conflict there. The board, once it's set up, is this going to be open to the public? Is there going to be agendas published? Is there going to be minutes published? Is there going to be a record of decisions taken by this board? Now, like I said, okay, it's early stages and this might come to fruition further down the line, but I have serious concerns regarding what's being proposed here. A question for officers. The number of jobs that have been mentioned. There's 20,000 jobs mentioned for Grangemouth alone. Where are these figures coming from? Where did this 20,000 jobs come from? At the end of the day, if there's 20,000 new jobs in Grangemouth, where are all these people going to live? because there isn't accommodation within the Falkirk Council area at the moment, and what's been projected for the future isn't going to be nearly enough to accommodate this new workforce. So what's going to be happening in that respect? My last issue, it was mentioned there about the screening with HM Customs. Now, I believe that as far as the container setup's concerned, there's only one scanner for the container port in Grangemouth, and that is not being used. I'm reliably informed that it's not being used, so there's no checks on any of the containers coming into the Grangemouth port. There's already been issues raised regarding the drug importation, which is a serious issue. People being trafficked, that's a very serious issue as well. But there doesn't seem to be any checks at the moment within the Grangemouth port, but we're being promised that everything's going to be up and running with the new Greenport situation. Serious concerns, and maybe officers could pick up on some of these points that I've made. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Nimmo. I think on the governance issues that there's a governance statement will come back in more detail. So I don't think we need to delve into that today, because I know that was discussed widely at the members' briefing. But perhaps some of the other points, Mr. Kettrick, you could maybe come back on.
Yes, so the intention is 20,000 jobs in the Grangemouth Falkirk area across the life of the Green Freeport. A lot of these people are already born, they're already in the system, they're all coming through the schools and things like that. There will be a transition of the economy as we move from the more industrial, carbon intensive industries to more greener industries, as and Green Freeport will play a large part in that. So yes, there could be population growth. There's a lot of that already in the system, yes, but it's certainly something that we will need to work on through things like our local development plan in the future, to consider how Falkirk as a wider area looks at economic growth, recovery and renewal. In terms of the comments made in relation to Fourth ports and drug trafficking and other illegal activities, that's certainly something I would be happy to raise with Fourth ports. However, they haven't raised any concerns with us through this, and I would suggest that they're operational matters that would be separate from the Fourth Green Freeport business process that we're going through. But it's certainly something I know myself and colleagues in trading standards and environmental health would be happy to raise with UK Border Force.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Councillor Steinbank, then I'll go to Councillor Garner to turn up, to wind up, sorry. Apologies.
Thank you, Convener. It's just on recommendation 4 in the report, agreeing that Falkirk Council enter into agreements with Fife and City of Edinburgh Councils to work collaboratively. In terms of the contents of those reports, will those be giving general ideas of the governance arrangements and then being remitted back to the respective councils for agreement? And when will we estimate the report that's been discussed? I believe it was by Councillor Garner and Mr. Kettrick. When will we estimate that report coming back before us? Thank you.
So the intention in terms of the agreements with Fife and the City of Edinburgh Council is to enter into memorandums of understanding in terms of general governance, such as an agreement that all representatives of the organisations will be, for instance, elected members, but also how we deal with the distribution of funds that come in through Falkirk Council, who signs those off, who are the responsible officers for dealing with things like that. So it's just to ensure that we have our aligned governance arrangements and we work collaboratively on that. In terms of timescales for the reports, they will be based as we progress through the outline business case into full business case. Clearly, we will have a decision to make in terms of the governance arrangements on who our representative is on the governance board, and we would look to capture all of that in the 1 or 2 reports that would come between now and as we get to the end of the year, if I was asked for a specific date, I would chicken out on that and say I'm not going to give you one, but certainly we'll be looking for something before recess, and then probably another one in the autumn to late autumn, just before we get to that full business case stage.
Thank you very much. And I just have one more question on 5.4 of the report. No, it's not 5.4. It's the risk in relation to resourcing, which has been classified as low. Can I have confirmation of when the resourcing we put into this bid and subsequent process will be taken out of the 25 million seed capital or 1 million startup fund? Would that be from the start of the work being taken by Falkirk Council employees on the bid, from the successful bid, or when the operation has been set up?
So already we have staff working on the Fourth Green Freeport and have been involved in making that initial submission. £1 million is expected to be received this financial year, but it is able to be carried over. And then once we get to the full business case stage, that's the trigger for the £25 million, which can then be used to unlock development sites, those initial sites that will be taken forward that were outlined in the bid. So in effect, once those monies come in this financial year, those will be used to support the resources, not just for Falkirk Council, but also Fife, City of Edinburgh, and also the board itself in terms of its establishment. So there's still work to be done in terms of how that's allocated, but the commitment is there. The guidance is clear that we've had as part of the bid process, is that the local authorities will be fully funded for our resources in setting up that governance and our arrangements for staff. And we'll be looking to recruit in the very, very near future.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Councillor Garner to sum up now. Thank
you. I'll be very, very quick, and I'd like to thank the bid team and all involved in winning this for the fourth area. I'm relatively happy with what I've heard here, and we have pretty much a cross-party agreement. Yes, members are rightly to raise concerns, but these will be addressed, I'm sure, as the process moves forward. So happy with that, Convener.
Okay, thank you. Happy to agree the report? Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 6, which is the Commercial Property Portfolio Strategy and Management Plan, and it's back with Mr. Keswick.
Thank you, Convener. The purpose of the report is to seek approval of the Commercial Property Strategy and Management Plan, which will establish a framework for the management of the Council's commercial property portfolios, which includes shops, industrial and office premises, together with other commercially let land and properties. There are 678 leased properties generating a total rental income across general services and the HRA of between £3.5 and £3.6 million per annum. The vision is highlighted in the attached strategy, and it is to manage the assets efficiently and effectively to support the achievement of the Council's corporate priorities and outcomes whilst delivering growing rental and capital values. The specific aims of the portfolio are, as members will be aware, to enable the Council to support and influence economic development and regeneration activities, support local, national and international business requirements and market-led business space requirements, support local employment and business growth, and effectively and efficiently manage the portfolio to sustain its performance over the longer term and provide a legacy for future generations. It should also be highlighted that the portfolio provides valuable, recurring and consistent revenue income to support wider council service delivery. We've highlighted the performance measures that will be incorporated into the framework. These include compliance, conditions, suitability, sufficiency, capacity, accessibility, sustainability, financial and management practices. The details of these activities that will be undertaken are outlined in the strategy itself, together with the appropriate performance measures. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Keswick. I'll go to Councillor Garner to move the report.
Thank you, Convener, and once again it's been covered excellently by Mr. Keswick. As outlined in the report, Falkirk Council has a long history in providing commercial property accommodation for New Start, local companies through to national and international businesses. It has enabled firms to grow, create employment and generate rental income for Falkirk Council. It delivers a rental income of approximately £3.5 million as mentioned. and has developed and evolved over several years to meet varying economic challenges and opportunities. The purpose of the Commercial Property Strategy and Management Plan is to provide a clear statement of the Council's continued aspirations, aims and objectives to ensure the commercial property portfolio supports the local and national economy. The vision is to manage the assets efficiently and effectively to support the achievement of corporate priorities and outcomes whilst delivering growing rental and capital values. The strategy and management plan will help realise the vision by setting out key objectives, actions and a performance framework to enable the measuring of progress in delivering the vision. The performance framework established by the strategy covers 9 areas, and that will ensure that the portfolio is managed in an effective and efficient way. These include ensuring properties are compliant, in a lettable condition, suitable for commercial business use, accessible both in terms of location and accessibility, and sustainable in terms of mitigating the impact on the environment. In addition, ensuring the portfolio has sustained financial performance, is managed in accordance with best practice and continues to support local economic development objectives, also forming part of the performance framework. The proposed commercial property portfolio strategy and management plan will provide the Council with a framework for the management of its commercial property assets and provide transparency in terms of performance. Again, thanks to officers and happy to move the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Garner. Councillor Bryce.
Thank you, Convener. I'll not cover everything that Councillor Garner just has done very well. I will say though that for businesses, that good quality commercial units will assist business, will attract businesses. You attract businesses, you attract jobs for our people. So it goes right back to the people of Falkirk. I welcome the work that's being done on energy efficiency on our actual stock. And I think that's a positive way going forward to meet our climate change ambitions. And all it's a very positive, it's a very ambitious report. I also welcome the targets going forward to increase our revenues on it by 750,000 over the term of this programme. And looking into it, I can see what we're looking to do by improving the quality of all units we've got. Then you'll have more people, and possibly you would look to put things out at a slightly higher cost as time goes on. So yes, it's very easy to second this one. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bryce. I've got Councillor Spears, Councillor Cairn, Councillor Hannah. Councillor Spears first.
Okay, thank you. I'm pleased to see the commercial portfolio property is being upgraded and maintained for 20,000 jobs coming to the local area. That'll be great. I would imagine the communities out there will say, why did this never happen to our community centres and other properties that are now on the asset review? Can I ask, where is the cost and the finance coming to fulfil this?
Mr. Kestrach.
Within the Council's approved capital programme, there is a small amount of money that's allocated for planned improvements to the estate. There is also, through rent incentives and working with our tenants, the opportunity for them to undertake improvements. And that's something that's been quite successful in a number of authorities, and indeed in this authority over the years, where properties that are in a slightly poorer condition, that are vacant, to then become let, particularly where there's longer term leases, there is rent freeze initially or stepped rents and things like that that can be used in exchange for tenants undertaking improvements to the property. So that's one of the key mechanisms that we would use going forward.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, Convener. Probably leading on for Councillor Spears there. The 678 units, how many are to the standard that we require, and how many will need work done to them?
In terms of lettability, we currently sit at over 95% occupancy, which would suggest that they're lettable and they're in an acceptable condition. However, it is an ageing portfolio. It's been built over many years, and there is now a requirement for us to start looking at the investment in them. Now, clearly, under a lot of the lease terms, they're full repair and insuring. Tenants are responsible for and liable for them. However, I think we are now at the stage where units become vacant. We have to intervene and raise the bar on those, undertake works to make them more sustainable, in better condition, more accessible, these types of things. To put a specific figure on it would be difficult because we don't know what the numbers that are going to become vacant are as we go forward. But clearly this framework is there to help us get that intelligence and to monitor that progress as we basically transform the portfolio over the next 5 and 10 years.
Thanks. Well, obviously supporting small businesses is something that as a council we need to make sure that we keep supporting. With regards to the monies that come in, the 3.5 million, how can we increase that?
So as we've highlighted in the report, there's a couple of easy areas to win there. One of them is when units do become vacant, the time that they are void, you know, that 5%. That's kind of always empty as the estate. We need to reduce those void periods so we get the works undertaken, we get them relet, and we drive the rental income in that way. We also look at increasing the lettable opportunities. You know, there is lots of little areas of ground round about our industrial estates and small buildings that may or may not come out of the strategic property review that will be suitable for letting, that will have commercial interest. We'll also look to ensure that our community benefit lease exemptions are recorded and identified again. They reflect a much more commercial way of managing them. And in effect, we want to look that we maximise the opportunities when rent reviews come up, when lease renewals come up, that we look at aligning those to make sure that they are at the market value. Not necessarily that we are driving the market, but we ensure that they're at the market value. So there's a huge amount of areas there where we can make improvements to the performance of the portfolio in terms of rental income.
Sure, I got a list a long time ago. Is there a list available?
Like all our assets, we publish the list that we have, and I'd be happy to share a list of all our commercial properties and those that are empty.
Probably my last question. With regards to, you mentioned about the 3.5, does all that money go to the HRA or some it go into the general fund?
No, convener, it's split across the two. It's about 2.8, 2.9 million to general fund and about £750,000 to HRA. HRA is primarily shops.
If you're indulging, so one more question that you
Briefly, yes, if you don't mind.
See the small areas that we've got, and you've probably highlighted a bit where we've got garage sites. Are they included in that? In this?
They're not. They're managed through the normal housing management process. This is primarily focused on those commercial lets, but clearly if there's any opportunities for new opportunities to come into the portfolio, myself and colleagues in housing would be happy to explore them.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Okay, I've got Councillor Hannah, Councillor Steenbank, and then I'll go back to Councillor Garner to sum up.
Thank you. I'll be quite brief because Councillor Kerr has kind of raised some of the issues I was going to raise. But in relation to a list of the properties available that we have, I would like to see over a period of time the occupancy levels, the costs, and the income from those properties, and the carbon emissions if we have them. Do we have all that readily available?
Unfortunately, we do not have that information. We certainly have rental income over a prolonged period of time. The costs is challenging, to be honest, in terms of what the council has invested on it. Whilst we have capital investment, we don't have a long list of records in terms of what incentives and how those were monetised. In terms of carbon emissions, we have energy performance certificates for the majority of our estate. However, the responsibility for the carbon emissions is the tenants. These are businesses. These are not our operational properties, so we don't necessarily retain that information.
And is work being undergone to try and get those costs? Because it does seem to me that it would be useful to know both the rental income and the costs to the council of the maintenance of these properties.
Yep, and that's what part of this framework is about, is now putting us into a much more commercial approach as to how we manage our estate and making sure that there is that transparency. What I would say is that a huge proportion of our estate is full repair and insuring, and therefore it's not the council who's investing in them, but we do invest particularly where there is vacant properties to bring them back up to standard to get them let, and we're happy to provide that information when it becomes available over the coming year.
Right, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Steinbeck, I did say I was going to go to Councillor Garner to wind up, but if it's a very brief question after Councillor Steinbeck, I'd appreciate that.
Thank you, Convener. It's just referring to the criteria listed at 5.4. I think the importance of sustainability in our commercial rents is obviously a key factor, and I'm glad to see it listed amongst 9 there. However, I do think that also directly flows into compliance and condition of buildings, especially when you're aiming to have long-term tenants, especially as has been raised throughout this conversation. Long-term, potentially vacant buildings. How will this framework operate to maintain buildings where possible over a long term with tenants, and also to mitigate energy costs on tenants?
So in effect, we want to seek to minimise the impact of the portfolio, and as we transition to a much more greener economy, let's call it, we want to help support tenants in that transition. One of the key areas is landlords improvements or tenants improvements, and making sure that we work collaboratively with tenants and ensuring that they can access support and resources through, whether it's third party funding through Business Gateway and people like that, to undertake those improvements. And in effect, we would have a much more flexible approach in providing them the consent where they undertake improvements, and being able to support them in doing that. So that's one of the key things to improve the overall sustainability in terms of energy and carbon emissions. So, you know, hopefully that answers your query.
Oh, thank you. Glad to see this report coming forward. Cheers.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Garner.
Thank you, Convener. It's good to hear so many pertinent questions and people taking a real interest in this, and it's good to see that they've been reading the reports beforehand as well. So yeah, happy to move the reports, and it's good to see us agreeing on reports.
Okay, thank you. We're happy to agree report. Okay. Okay, moving on to item 7, which is improving Falkirk's public transport and promoting a cleaner environment. And I'll go to Michael McGuinness to present the report.
Thank you, Convener. What members have in front of them today is a report, an update following the council decision, which originally came in the 28th of September, but finally decided upon in October, to provide elected members with a comprehensive report on improving Falkirk's public transport and promoting a cleaner environment. The recommendation of this report is as follows. It is recommended that the executive notes that the council does not have the capacity or expertise internally to prepare a comprehensive report of this nature. It recommends that the executive agrees that the preparation of such a comprehensive report does not progress at this time, given the challenging financial position facing the council both in revenue and the capital revenue budget. Or agrees that should elected members want to continue with such a report, then revenue budget needs to be allocated in 2023-24 period to allow an external consultant to be commissioned for this purpose. And agrees that if the work is to proceed, the scope of the comprehensive report is outlined below in section 5.5 to 5.13. In terms of the report itself, the officers have provided sufficient background in terms of the details at 4.2 regarding the motion that was brought at council. The officers then go on to explain the current situation regarding the work that the Transport Planning Unit carry out in relation to subsidising the buses across the council area, to provide 58 mainstream education buses, 20 additional support need education bus services, 4 social work day centre transport provision and dial a journey provision across the local authority area. It also includes provision of a taxi card travel concession scheme for people with mobility issues, which continues to date. The council also asked that in the 15th of March 2022, that like members agreed that the Director of Police Services should prepare a report on a number of items identified by the Policy Development Panel, including exploration or enhanced role of taxi private hire car in a demand responsive transport strategy, and the review of the taxi card scheme. Should the Executive agree to progress with a major transport review, then officers would include this aspect in the proposed scope of the report. Also important to highlight, if the members agree the recommendations, officers will continue to bring forward those recommendations from the 15th of March 2022. I'm supported by my colleague Chris Cox from Transport Planning Unit, and I'm happy to take any questions regarding this report. Thank you.
Okay, I am aware that there has been a very late amendment come in, which is a bit disappointing, a bit unfortunate. I'm going to ask if people want to take a short recess, because I don't know if everybody will have seen that amendment.
Yes, please.
Okay. Can we take maximum 15 minutes? Okay, thank you. Okay, folks, we're back in session, public session again. So thank you for that. I will now go to Councillor Gardner to speak to the report.
Thank you, Convener. Members agreed that the Director of Police Services should prepare a comprehensive report on improving Falkirk's public transport and promoting a cleaner environment. Currently, the majority of the bus network in Falkirk area is operated commercially by McGill's, and Falkirk Council spends circa £1 million per annum subsidising routes that are not commercially viable. In addition, the Council spends £3.4 million per annum providing buses for mainstream and additional support needs school pupils, £210,000 providing dial journey and taxi card services, and operates an in-house fleet of vehicles providing social work transport. This report outlines the scope of a report, including investigating using the new powers granted to councils in the Transport Scotland Act 2019 to operate municipal bus companies at a range of scales, from operating some or all of the current subsidised network in-house to a large-scale bus operation. The comprehensive report would also look at the scope to operate some or all of the current school bus network in-house and the future operation of dial journey and taxi card. The report will provide a number of options for the future of public transport services in Falkirk Council area, with business cases to allow elected members to make informed decisions about service provision in the future. This will include any efficiencies that can be made to the services that are currently provided, for example, establishing demand-responsive services in some areas. Any municipal bus operation would require significant capital and revenue funding to establish and operate at a time when the Council is facing unprecedented budgetary pressures, and members need to consider a real risk that the Council may not be in a position to implement any recommendations that are forthcoming should this study progress. It should be noted that there is not capacity or sufficient expertise to produce this comprehensive report in-house, let alone run and maintain a public bus service, and that an external consultant would need to be commissioned at a cost possibly in excess of £100,000. Given the fact we are currently looking at taking savings across all services to address our budget gap, is this a prudent use of council funds? I would say no, and members need to consider whether or not the report should go ahead and how it might be funded. I would like to thank officers in bringing this report forward and agree that the preparation of such a report does not progress at this time, given the challenging financial position facing the Council both in revenue and capital budgets. With this in mind, I'd like to move and agree with points 1 and 2 in the recommendations. Thank you, Convener.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Garner. Go to Councillor Sinclair.
Happy to second and reserve the right. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I will now open it up. Councillor Hannah, it might be prudent at this time for you to maybe move your amendment formally.
Yes, thank you, Convener. I would move my amendment formally and reserve the right to speak to my amendment later on. The amendment is that we do go forward. I think everyone has seen it. Yes, has everyone got a copy of the amendment? Do I need to explain it now for the purposes of the record?
I think it might be helpful
before I actually move
to speak to to move the amendment.
You want me to move it now formally?
I think, Convener, it may be helpful if Councillor Hannah does that, perhaps for the benefit of those watching the live stream. Yeah. It will make the context of the debate, I think, clearer.
I have no problem with doing that. We are deeply disappointed at this report and these recommendations. The original motion calling for a report looking at a comprehensive report looking at the various aspects of provision of a better public transport system for the Falkirk Council area was before everyone on the council and before officers on the 28th September last year. It was agreed unanimously at a council meeting on the 27th of October last year. Now, given the complexity of the issues involved, it didn't really surprise us that we hadn't seen a report by now, because we would have expected it to take some time. It's also, the proposal is not one to be dealt with within the coming financial year. This is a long-term proposal to look at the possibility of taking on the improvement of our bus services. So it is really disappointing that it has taken 5 months to come back with a report that says we can't do this report because we don't have the staffing and we don't have the expertise. I think it would have been expected that the administration would have known what level of staffing and expertise we had at the time, and that could have been discussed any time since September last year. However, this is now being brought forward. I have done a bit of a quick check, and it shows that we actually have 10 staff in our police services department whose job titles either say transport planning or transport coordinator in their title. Now, I do not take issue with the fact that we do not have the number of staff or the expertise. If our officers are telling us that we do not have enough staff or sufficient expertise, that's fine. There are many things that we do not have the staff or the expertise for. There are many matters that Falkirk Council has to address by putting the activity out to consultants. It's not uncommon. I attended a meeting recently where consultants were running a meeting about the regeneration of the Falkirk Town Centre. And that was put out to consultants without having to make a specific report about it, as far as I'm aware. A substantial amount of staff time has been devoted, though, to the Falkirk Plan, towards a fairer Falkirk Plan, to the Falkirk Economy Strategy, and a great many other documents that Falkirk Council subscribes to and is involved in the development of. Planning for an efficient, affordable and green transport system is one way of achieving some of the aims in these plans. Developing plans is not enough. We have to then look at the ways in which we put those aims, those greater aims, into practice and make the plans a reality. An integrated and greener public transport system will encourage more people to stop using their cars. It'll help us to move towards a safer, healthier environment and help reduce carbon emissions. All of those things are within our plans. An integrated, greener and affordable public transport system will encourage more active travel. It will enable people to meet friends and family, with the consequences of improving mental and physical health and well-being, all in all our plans. An efficient and affordable Falkirk Council-wide transport system, coordinated with other local authorities, will improve the ability of our citizens to get to work or take up work opportunities and enable them to access healthcare more easily. An efficient and affordable public transport system will encourage people to use town and village centres across the district and will thereby stimulate regeneration. All of these things are aims of this council. The people of Bowness and Braes and many other parts of the Falkirk Council area need direct bus services to doctors' surgeries, routine hospital appointments, work and leisure, and they just don't have it. The citizens of Falkirk Council area expect their elected representatives to plan ahead. This administration, since I came onto the Falkirk Council in May last year, seems to me to be taking a fairly short-term and narrow view of what is needed for the future. Constantly we are talking about what's happening in the next financial year or possibly the one after. The people of Falkirk Council area need a vision of what's going to happen when we begin to get somewhere into a better place, as we all hope we will. When funding begins to be available, we need to have plans in place ready to move forward and do the things that the people of the Falkirk Council area deserve. For the past few years, the difficulties and griefs that our citizens have suffered, I don't need to explain to everyone around this room. Our citizens need to know that we are planning for a better future. They need to know that we have some kind of vision for a better future. Now, the motion which I am proposing here, I have circulated, and I apologise for only circulating it this morning before this meeting began. It was the first opportunity for the Labour group to discuss it and come to a democratic decision was last night. And that's the reason for it. I do try to present my motions and amendments timeously. But the motion is saying, yes, we need to take some monies from somewhere. There are a number of options detailed in the motion. It's possible that there might be access to levelling up funds for transport systems. That's one of the things that levelling up funds can cover. It is possible, and the original motion actually did ask for officers to look at possible sources of funding in any case. There are funds within our reserves, and if necessary, I'm suggesting that we take £100,000 out of what is over £13 million worth of reserves, with a view to obtaining a consultant report that gives us a plan for the future, for the improvement of our public transport systems across the Falkirk Council area. It is essential that we do so for the sake of the health and well-being of citizens, for the economy and for regeneration across the area. I move this amendment.
Okay, thank you. Do you have a seconder?
Thank you, Convener. We must recognise that currently Falkirk residents have poor to no bus service. The last bus into Bowness is 9 o'clock at night, and as a woman who works shifts, I can see obvious issues with this. In rural areas such as Slamanan, when services are scheduled, they often don't turn up. What are the equality impacts of this? We're currently in discussion to close 130 properties, expecting residents to travel further to access services, but we're unwilling to invest in improving bus services. We currently have an active consultation looking to reduce school buses, and children may not even have the option to use a public bus. In 2019, this council declared a climate emergency and pledged to make it a priority. What are the climate implications of not investing in public transport? These are significant issues impacting all of our residents. We should be bettering the bus service, not only for those who rely on it, but also we should be enabling and encouraging more people onto buses. Surely we have the vision and drive to improve bus services for now and for the future of this area. I am glad to second Councillor Hannah's amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Bundy, then Councillor Gauss.
Thank you, Convener. With very limited resources that the council has, facing £67 million worth of cuts over the next 4 years, our constituents want us to be prudent and pragmatic in how we spent that money. And even before we've reached budget day, we're now looking at potentially spending £100,000 from reserves or service concessions, not considering how better they could be spent. And I think that approach is economically reckless. That's why I won't be supporting this amendment. With limited funds, we should be spending it on taking positive action, not to pay people to think and talk. And when we are potentially looking at the closure of swimming pools, a strategic property review which could close 130 buildings, I think members of the public will be asking, why are we spending £100,000 to pay a consultant and not spending it on keeping these properties open? So I think we have to take a step back, be pragmatic and look at the implications of limited sources in the bigger context of the budget. And that's why I'll be voting for the motion and not the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bundy. Could I ask Councillor Hannah and Councillor Patterson to now put their microphones off so others can come in? Councillor Bowes.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. As much as I agree on the energy side and our targets, which small point for the author of the amendment. The council's targets are 2030, not 2045. That's the Scottish Government. I'm sure it's 2045. It's not a council one. I listened with interest about particularly short-termism, which was mentioned. But prior to that, there was a whole list of plans which were spoken about, which we've been working on, including the Falkirk plan. There's even a plan in here which is about long-term, and it was good to hear all the long-term plans that we're doing, but then to be accused of short-termism, I thought was a bit conflicting in that presentation. I agree, spending £100,000 of reserves or service concessions puts £100,000 on to next year's budget gap, which is already, we know already that's a reasonably significant number. And for that in itself, I think I agree that we should not be doing this just now. Plus, there's not really any discussion, and there's not about how we're actually going to pay the multiple millions that it would cost to actually set this up. So I totally agree with the proposal.
Thank you. I have great pleasure in supporting this amendment, but I would ask one question, if this is okay, on 6. My eyesight's not too great, except that due to the lack of staffing and expertise, it would necessary to commission an external consultant and instruct officers to do this. What about one of our famous consultations? Every member of the public that doesn't have a car, especially who lives outside the Falkirk-Carmelin area, is complaining about the bus service. What about people in Bo'ness, the Braes, further afield, to Larbert, Stennismuir, Airth? We've already shown that we have a scant regard for our rural areas, but this just makes it worse. I have a particular area, Bean Cross and Grangemouth, and due to a small work to help with a turning point, doesn't have a bus service. Now, we can't keep this centralist view that if it's okay for the centre of Falkirk, it's okay for the rest of the district. It is not okay for the rest of the district. And we need to remember why we're here. We're here as a council. We're here not to provide bus places to one bus service to one place and one place alone. We have shopping centres in the outlying areas. We want people to visit them. Now, I'm quite surprised as yet our green portfolio, climate change portfolio holders not come in to express how the bus service will help to cut emissions with everybody having to drive about. If there's already state-of-the-art, fit-for-purpose bus service, then that would surely help with the emissions. Thank you.
Transport providers and buses.
Thanks,
And to do so, we know the outcome of that consultant work with millions, multi-millions of pounds that would be required to be invested to set up that, including the infrastructure, the staff, etc. At times where we are facing such severe cuts within their own budgets, to be raising expectations of the public that we will be able to deliver on something like that would be absolutely abhorrent at this particular time. We have yet to set our budget. We have yet to see how we might use service concessions, and yet to see how we will be able to invest for the future. And I think we need to be honest with our constituents and our communities. What we can do and what we will do is continue to work to look to improve the public bus services wherever we can. We work across councils with our colleagues in Stirling and Clackmannan to look at improving bus services across Forth Valley, and there's work going on with the Connectivity Commission to look at doing that. and that may be a more appropriate route in which funding could indeed be identified from some of the strategic transport funds going forward. But at this particular time, to be able to commit to a consultation and spending money that is really very, very pressured right now, to then see something that we would not be able to deliver on, I think would be wrong for us to do, raising expectations beyond what we would ever be able to actually deliver on. But there is a huge amount of work that's still ongoing, and I don't know whether Michael, you've got to just highlight some of the other work that is actually being delivered on, and will continue to be worked on, particularly in terms of the risk of.
Yes, thank you, Convener. As you can imagine, the commercial bus industry has faced some significant pressures in terms of fuel costs, in terms of recruiting of staff, and this has caused a number of problems in terms of the provision that they provide to our communities, particularly our schools. And our officers have spent a considerable amount of time working with various different providers to ensure that the buses are fit for purpose, that they have sufficient driver capacity, but the commercial entities are finding it very difficult to maintain their existing fleet with existing staff members. So my staff are constantly working with the communities, with the bus operators, with education colleagues to ensure we have the best provision of services we can provide to date. The concern going forward is very much, as the council leaders highlighted, the expectations that could be raised from our communities in terms of the council taking on the public running of buses, the investment in a garage and engineers and maintenance people and staff, etc., would be significant. And I think this report highlights that in some detail. So there's a lot of work that the Transport Planning Unit are involved in. I think importantly also, in relation to Councillor Spear's conversation, active travel and getting people out of the car is absolutely key for the council. How do we support those to use electric vehicles? How do we support people to use their bikes, more importantly, to get on their feet and to walk to various different locations across the authority area? So I think, the efforts and time of officers and Transport Planning Unit is very much working with the bus operators today to provide the best service we possibly can, supported by the council, and to ensure that we support and develop more active travel opportunities for our community going forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. I've got Councillor Kerr, I've got Councillor Sinclair, and Councillor Spears. I'll allow you in only if it's a question, not a speech.
Sorry, I was named there, so.
But it was by an officer, not by another member. But I've got Councillor Kerr and Councillor Sinclair, and if it is a question, but only a question, I'll allow you back in. Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, Convener. I don't know if Michael will be able to answer these questions. Can I ask how much an effective, clean public transport system would cost the council?
I certainly don't have that information to hand, and my understanding is the comprehensive report that was asked for from an external consultant and experts in this field would help us get to that point. But we do recognise that it would be substantial, but we don't know what that figure would be at this point in time, Councillor.
Okay, and my last question is, has any of the bus companies made you aware of their plans for the green bus travel?
I'll maybe pass that on to my colleague Chris Cox, who has regular conversation with a number of the bus operators. Chris, would you mind answering that question, please?
Yeah, we haven't been given any firm information, but McGill's certainly have a quite major vehicle investment programme planned, and we're anticipating some new vehicles and hopefully green vehicles in Falkirk in the next financial year, so that will be from April 23 onwards. But we don't have any specific figures about how many or what type of vehicles that would include.
Okay, that certainly help if they came forward with these kind of modes of transport. But thanks, Chris. Thanks, Michael.
Just to see some of the challenges that the bus operators are facing is the charging and infrastructure and facilities. They could look to put it into Bannockburn, but they can't put it into Larbert because it sits in a floodplain. So that's some of the challenges they're facing themselves. Okay, Councillor Sinclair.
Thanks, convener. Obviously, I mean, a publicly owned and operated transport system for the benefit of everybody within our communities is a great aspiration to have. And to be upfront, I would be supportive of such an ambition. However, I'm also a realist. We have three compounding issues across our communities right now. First of all, council faces a significant financial strain. Second of all, we as a council, we would be starting from a standing start to build anything from the ground up. But third, we have an operator in this area who have only recently, within the last 6 months, taken over the operation of bus services within our communities. Are we really suggesting that they have all the answers right away, considering the inherited issues that they've had? Now, to address one of the points that was thrown in this direction, I don't think that this is just an outlying areas issue. I believe that the issues are compounded in the Braes and Bowness and perhaps even towards the Denny area, but in more rural areas, yes, the issue would be more, it felt more acutely. But I can assure members across the table here that people within the Falkirk, Central and Langleys, Bainsford, Camlin areas do have issues with bus services, and it's the same issues that are being felt right across the district. So this is a council issue that requires a much more kind of focused attitude on the short-term issues. The problem with those short-term issues is that there's not a lot of them within our control. I don't agree that the Labour amendment is the right thing to do at this particular time, given the fact that we do have such a financial strain, but we also haven't fixed the underlying issues with the current system yet, and it would be premature to do such a thing and have such a comprehensive report in this period before we even know what we're doing here and now.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Sinclair. Councillor Spears, just because you were named doesn't give you the right to come back, I have to say. So only if you have a question. If you don't have a question,
I'm aware of what a question is, convener, and you don't need to constantly tell me that. It's a bit demeaning.
Oh,
Can I ask the officer a question?
Sorry, you don't have to be rude to me either, Councillor Spears.
You've been rude to me. You mentioned driver capacity. Can you expand on that?
So you convener,
Yes, thank you.
The bus operators, commercial bus operators, have a number of vacancies they are struggling to fulfil in terms of driver capacity across the piece. I don't have specific numbers. The commercial operators, in communication with the council, have identified that they are struggling to fill some of their vacant posts and struggling to find drivers for their vehicles. I don't have specific numbers, but that's certainly the impression that bus operators are given us.
Councillor Bundy, you have spoken. As long as it's a question, that's fine.
Would it be possible to get a breakdown of the CO2 output per person of the different forms of transport, so buses, cars, minibuses and so on, to actually ensure that having big buses going through the rural countryside is eco-friendly?
I will endeavour to find that information for you, Councillor Mundy. I'm not aware of that information being at hand. I wouldn't be surprised if some academic organisation has looked into this, but I'll endeavour to see if I can source such information for you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll go to Councillor Gardner to sum up.
Thank you, convener. And I don't need to sum up too much because Councillor Bundy has done very well, and so too is my colleague, Councillor Sinclair, as well as you did as well. A lot of points have been raised, a lot of questions have been asked and answered. I'm still sticking with my original decision that this is not the right time to do this. I'm sincerely hoping that the Labour group haven't shown their hand early here, and again using reserves and not addressing the financial position we currently face. So yes, happy to move.
Okay, thank you. We'll move to the vote.
Thank you, convener. And the motion consists of points 1 and 2 in the recommendations, and that motion is moved by Councillor Garner and seconded by Councillor Sinclair, against which there is an amendment which has been circulated, moved by Councillor Hannah and seconded by Councillor Patterson. Councillor Bowes. Councillor Bundy.
Motion.
Councillor Devine.
Motion.
Councillor Garner,
The motion.
Councillor Hannah,
Amendment.
Councillor Kerr, Councillor Meikle-John,
Motion.
Councillor Nimmo,
Amendment.
Councillor Patterson,
Amendment.
Councillor Sinclair,
Motion.
Councillor Spears,
Amendment.
and Councillor Steenbank.
Amendment.
Convener, there are 7 votes for the motion, there are 5 votes for the amendment, and the motion is carried.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We'll now move on to item 8, which is a review of electric vehicle charging tariff, and it's with Mr McGuinness again.
Thank you, Convener. The purpose of this report today is to seek approval for Falkirk Council to increase the electrical vehicle charging tariff point, minimum spend and overstayed charge across our charging network. The move responds to a recent increase in energy costs to ensure the day-to-day running cost of the network is covered by users. It's recommended that the Executive approves a tariff increase at 2.1 Section 1 for fast AC chargers at 7 kilowatt and 22 kilowatt up to 0.48 pence per kilowatt hour, for rapid and DC chargers up to 0.69 pence per kilowatt hour, and for ultra rapid chargers, which will be due in the summer of 23-24, up to 0.75 pence per kilowatt hour. The recommendation also seeks for approval to increase the minimum spend to £5 and to increase the overstay charge for fast, rapid and ultra rapid chargers as follows. For fast chargers, which is the 22 kilowatt, not for 7 kilowatt, where there will be no overstay charge for 7 kilowatt, to be for 22 kilowatt to be £12 after the first 4 hours plus 10 minutes, and a subsequent £12 subsequently every 4 hours duration thereafter. For rapid DC charges, a £20 overstay charge after the first 60 minutes plus a 10-minute grace period, and £20 every subsequent hour thereafter. And for ultra rapid DC charges, a £30 overstay charge after the first 40 minutes plus a 10-minute grace period, and a £30 every subsequent 40 minutes thereafter. It's recommended also that due to the considerable fluctuations in the energy market and the impact on the charging points for the council itself, it delegates authority to the Director of Place Services to modify council charging tariffs to address these fluctuation charges in the marketplace. Falkirk Council has been one of the leaders in terms of developing and implementing vehicle charging points across the local authority area. By the end of this next financial year, we will have 90 charging points. The charging tariff we have implemented for the last number of years has been at 25 pence. There was an important report that came forward from Scottish Futures Trust identifying a number of points we're looking to address through these recommendations. One in particular is that the requirement that as electrical vehicle charging vehicles become more prevalent in our society, there will be a requirement for many, many more charging points across our communities. We don't believe the public sector and councils can do this on their own. We really believe that we need the private sector to become involved and to roll out many more charging points across our communities. To enable that to happen, we believe, and SFT have recommended, that councils need to be more competitive in their pricing to make sure there are less barriers to entry for the private sector to compete in this market. So one of the moves and one of the recommendations here is to make our pricing more competitive. We believe we're leading the way, and that many local authorities will be reconsidering their current tariff pricing to make sure that we're more competitive in the market to encourage more private sector engagement and involvement. I'm happy to take any questions in this paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I'll go to Councillor Sinclair to move the paper.
I believe that there might be an amendment coming forward. Would that be right?
I've not been notified formally of an amendment, but Councillor Bundy, did you have something?
Yes, moving forward an amendment which is currently with Colin and Jack.
Okay. I think if we maybe hear from yourself first, and then Councillor Bundy can maybe formally move his amendment, and if required, we can go have a recess at that point.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. So thank you, convener, and thanks, Michael, for that full update on the paper. The report before us today seeks to increase Falkirk Council's electric vehicle charging tariffs, the minimum spend and overstay charge across our charging network. I would say that we are potentially going to make a small change to 0.3 under the rapid charger to increase the grace period to 15 minutes rather than 10. And I hope that if that would be agreeable to move forward with that. However, this report in front of us is in response to the increase in energy costs to ensure that the day-to-day running costs, maintenance and management of the network are supported by the EV car users, and importantly, to encourage the private sector to become an active player in the provision of EV charging as the market matures. These recommendations have been presented today to ensure that Council's provision of charging stations meets a cost-neutral position and reduces the subsidy we have been and continue to provide, considering the backdrop of the significant financial pressures currently facing Council. The report outlines the need to increase the tariff structure to recover the cost of delivering a non-statutory service at a time when budget pressures are significant, which is exacerbated by increasingly fluctuating energy and running costs. Additionally, the Scottish Government is changing the way future infrastructure is funded to encourage investment from the private sector in the nationwide charging network. This comes as we see a growing demand for charging points while we reduce our reliance on fossil fuel vehicles, and it's clear that the public sector cannot deliver this investment fully on its own. Officers have looked closely at the market, and Falkirk Council is one of the leading authorities in Scotland on the delivery of charging stations across our communities. This council is ahead of the curve in providing charging stations and pricing accordingly. Many authorities, we believe, will be following this example in increasing their tariffs to be more financially sustainable, while encouraging more private sector investment. We want to ensure the users of charging stations do so responsibly, with increased minimum spend and overstay penalties. Officers believe they have struck the balance to encourage improved behavioural use. It's also important that the Council can respond effectively to changes in the utility market, and either increase or hopefully reduce our charging tariffs as the market fluctuates. As the market matures, I'm confident officers will consider a more flexible tariff structure in the future to support more of our community as electric vehicles become more affordable. And the demands of those that are in flatted accommodation requiring provision away from home can be met with a range of options from the public and private sector. Finally, I want to thank officers in bringing forward the report and encourage elected members to approve the recommendations contained within the report in front of us today, and I move the report.
Thank you, and Councillor Sinclair. Councillor Garner?
Happy to second reserving the right.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bundy, do you want to speak to your amendment? And perhaps we can maybe get that shared.
Excuse me, could we see it, please?
Yeah, I'm just.
Thank you, convener. The amendment that I'm putting forward is a very slight tweak to recommendation 4. We agree in principle that the private sector should be encouraged to invest in the rollout of electric vehicle charging points throughout Falkirk Council, and that making pricing more competitive is a step in the right direction. The rollout of electric vehicle charging is very important if we're going to meet both our 2030 and 2045 targets. The amendment that we will be putting forward is to replace recommendation 4 with, and I quote, delegates authority to the Director of Police Service to modify charging tariffs to address fluctuating energy prices for a maximum of 2 years. The purpose of this amendment is to increase the flexibility that the Director of Police Service has. Before this meeting, I did speak to Michael about the projections of the different options presented, and very sensibly just said too unpredictable, and that's the reality. There's too many changing variables, and I fear that having the terminology cost neutral within the recommendation may have unforeseen consequences in the future when the Director of Police Services wants to make a price change. So that is why that has been taken out in our amendment. But we also want to ensure democratic accountability, and that is why we have put the sunset clause of 2 years into the amendment. And that's not that I have any doubts that prices would go way beyond the price. That would be reasonable, but it's just to ensure that there's accountability, that the democratic voice will be heard, and yeah, ensure that democracy is leading the way. So I'm happy to move this amendment in my name.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bundy. And Councillor Kerr?
Second that, we reserve the right.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Councillor Sinclair to see whether you require a recess to discuss or whether you're content to go to debate.
I'd be content to go to debate, but I'm aware that there are others in the room who may want to consider their options further.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, I'm astonished, since I was so heavily criticised for having put my amendment on the table before the meeting started, that you're thinking of going ahead with this amendment without giving anybody an opportunity when it was 11:48 before I saw it. So yes, we would like a recess, please.
In comparison, by way of explanation, yours was substantial. Councillor Hannah, this is relatively minor. And it's one that probably could be moved on the day as opposed to a substantial, and that was something that was informally agreed with the group leaders through our discussions. But yeah, happy to have a 10-minute recess. Thank you. Okay, folks, if we can come back into session, please. Okay, thank you. I'll go firstly to Councillor Sinclair.
Thanks, convener. In a rare moment of harmony, I'm content to accept the amendment proposed by Councillor Bundy, with a small amendment to the amendment that makes it clear that it's not just fluctuating energy costs, and associated running costs. Given that while electricity costs and energy costs may reduce, running and maintenance costs may increase, which would put us in a situation where we're back in the same place that we currently are. So if that's acceptable and agreeable, I'm content to accept.
Okay, I'm just going to ask Mr Moody if that is acceptable to be able to do that.
It's open to the mover of a motion to alter the text of the motion with the consent of the seconder. So we just need to be clear that Councillor Garner's content with that as well.
Yes, I'm content.
And then it's a question for whether Councillor Bundy wants to still insist on his amendment or happy to let it fall on the basis of the adjustment to the motion.
Happy to accept the amendment to the amendment.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hannah, do you have any further amendment or any further comment to make?
No further amendment.
Okay, any other comment or question from any member? Councillor Spears?
To be consistent, as we discussed the bus problem earlier, the consistency here is to get cheap, available transport for everybody. And since many more people will have to be using their cars after we failed to get through the amendment regarding the buses, then I will certainly be agreeing with the amendment purely through consistency, because as we push forward with solar panel to charge these cars, then hopefully the price will be kept down. That is the idea, there is installing our own solar panels like we have at the Falkirk Stadium down there in Grangemouth. It will be interesting to see how we progress.
Okay, thank you. As there is no further amendment, the motion is amended. So if I can ask, the contributions are kept fairly brief. Councillor Steinbach and Councillor Kerr.
Yeah, thank you, convener. Similarly happy to accept based on the flexibility that this could potentially give the scheme. Thanks to Michael and his team for developing this report and bringing it forward. Hopefully it will lead to the expansion of electric vehicle charging points across the district, which is an ambition we all share in this room. To promote people into electric vehicle usage, it is important to have that access. So happy to support the motion as amended.
Thank you. Councillor Kerr.
Just a question for Michael, probably leading on for what Councillor Steinbach mentioned there in his summary. What plans have we got to increase these charge points in other areas, particularly the more rural areas, either by private or public?
Thank you, Councillor. Through you, convener. We have current plans for 32 new EV charging points in 10 different locations. I don't have that detail to hand, but I'm very happy to share that with members to identify where those locations are. We are having officers are having a number of discussions with other private sector providers who are looking at our area about potential locations. So obviously, as they come forward, we're happy to kind of share that information as and when it's available.
Thanks, Michael. I just feel it's important that if somebody getting an electric car, if they're in the outskirts, say the Falkirk area, and can't get it charged, and it'll be interesting to get the locations. So thanks, Michael. Thanks, convener.
Okay, thank you. Are we happy to accept the amended motion? Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 9, and it's a projected financial position, and it's Mrs. Templeman.
Thank you, convener. The projection report that's in front of you at the moment is the last projection report before the year end. And the position reported today shows a much more positive picture for the 22-23 financial outturn than we had previously reported. The report to the December executive, although it was only a short time ago, was based on figures at the end of October. And there always is a bit of a time lag due to our reporting timelines. That report projected the use of £6.8 million of reserves to balance the position for 22-23, and that figure's reduced significantly to £3.1 million of reserves in this report. The council had budgeted to apply £5 million of reserves in 22-23, so the latest projection represents an improvement of 1.9 million against the budgeted position. The report presented today does ask Executive to note that the pay award for teachers is not settled. It wasn't settled at the time of writing and it isn't settled at this point. However, our understanding is that an announcement is imminent. So at this point, it's still unclear what the impact of that award would be on the 22-23 outturn and indeed on the 23-24 budget gap position. So it's just important that today's report is seen in that context. There are also other areas that remain subject to review and where there could be movement between now and the year end, and I'll outline some of those. One is energy. Finance are working with the energy team and police services to review the bills that have been coming in against our projections. Our latest bills are showing a slight improvement in the position, so we want to sort of do a bit more work to better understand that, but also we recognise that we're still being told this is a really volatile area going forward, so there's not really a lot of certainty in that area at this point. The loan charges were reviewed as part of the capital programme work. Council had agreed to a capital programme review in September, and that, alongside our higher cash balances than we anticipated, has meant that our borrowing has been pushed back and we've borrowed later than we expected. Our borrowing assumptions are currently reflecting quite high interest rates. And so any reduction can have quite a material impact. So we've done some work to look at that, and there'll be further work before the year end, just depending on what we borrow, when we borrow, and what the interest rates are at the time we borrow. I think it's important though to note that we are still committed to doing the same level of borrowing that members have agreed, so it's just a timing issue more than if we may make savings in 22-23, but we still have to budget for that full level of borrowing in 23-24. The other area I would highlight is industrial action. The report highlights some savings that will have come from the industrial action from teachers to date. As I say, we are expecting a further pay award offer imminently, but we'll have to see what impact that has and whether that's enough to bear further strike action. So, albeit those are the areas that we will still be keeping under review, at this stage there is an improvement in the Council's financial position for 22-23. And some of the main reasons for that include, as I've already mentioned, the strike action. So there's just under £700,000 of a financial benefit to the council from the strike action. The cost for the national transfer scheme within children and families looked to be a lot lower than we had budgeted for. We have, as members know, a recruitment freeze in place, and we are seeing that that's having the intended effect, with a significant proportion of savings coming from staff vacancies at this point. I think it's important to highlight that those aren't necessarily easy savings, and in some cases, some of those vacancies reflect recruitment difficulties as much as they may reflect posts that are being held as part of the recruitment freeze. There's a much higher amount of income from waste anticipated due to the dry recyclate market prices, which have stayed high. And there's also been a significant reduction in our waste tonnages, and that's been showed through as a reduction in cost. I think overall we've highlighted in the report before the wider ask of services to try and identify savings of 5% within their budgets. So there has been a much stricter cross-control approach being taken across the council. And I think it's important to remember that we did that with a view to trying to increase the council's reserves to give us a bit of a better footing going forward, recognising that we're facing significant financial challenges in the coming years. So the outcome of all those factors is that the projected reserves balance is 13.6 million, which is above the policy range of the 7.5 to 11 million pounds that we have at this point. And we are looking at options for a prudent application of some of those reserves in a way that would help us to address future pressures and challenges. So paragraph 5.4.2 of the report, which is on page 109 of the agenda, sets out some ideas of how reserves could be used prudently, and it does note some potential uses for reserves that could support transformation and delivery of recurring savings in future years. However, given the uncertainties that there still are for 22-23, our recommendation is that any decision in that area would form part of the budget report that comes back to members on the 1st of March. There's some updates provided on page 110 of the agenda for repairs and renewals fund and the earmarked reserves, and there's no significant changes in those areas. We have the workforce changes laid out in section 5.5, and obviously that information is taken, it's a snapshot in time, but the figure from November 2022, the FTE equivalent has reduced by 25 from October 2022. And housing is shown in section 5.6 of the report, which is page 112 of the agenda, and that area remains on budget. That's an area where we're seeing the challenges to recruit staff and challenges to deliver property repairs continuing to have an impact. So you'll see those underspends in Appendix 4, which is page 122 of the agenda. It is anticipated that the underspends in those areas would be offset by contributions to capital, and that will help reduce future borrowing costs for housing. That's important because we do anticipate that the position for housing will become more challenging in future years, and that's in part due to the increased borrowing costs that come alongside it, quite an ambitious capital investment programme for housing. As part of the HRA budget, officers are recommending that some of that underspend within housing, 250,000, is allocated to the Household Support Fund, and that's reflected in recommendations in section 2 of the report. And so just to summarise, the financial position presented is much more positive than we had originally expected. However, we need to look at that position in the context of the extremely challenging 4-year financial position which has been set out in the financial strategy. And it must also be stressed that there remains significant volatility in the economy, and there's very mixed views on what 2023 can bring. And we have the uncertainties with the pay awards that will impact on the 22-23 position. So there are still serious financial challenges remaining ahead of the council, and there is still quite a lot of financial uncertainty that can impact on the council's position. I'm happy to.
Thank you for that, Amanda. As Amanda said, this is the final projection report that we have, and we are now in the final phases of looking to setting our next year's budget. And I just want to acknowledge the work that's been done right across the council in the very robust budget monitoring that has helped get us to a better position than what we were, and obviously highlighting the particular challenges that we still face, the volatility around the energy market, while there has been a slight improvement in that. I think we don't know where that's likely to go for the future, and there is the need to have a cushion of comfort there in order to be able to deal with that, and that's where we need to be very careful about what our reserves are used for in order to be able to do that. Similarly, we don't know the final outcome in relation to teachers' pay, nor indeed what next year's pay deal will finally bring to us, and fully anticipate there'll be a requirement to look at a contribution there, and therefore we have to look at how that might be funded, certainly in the short term. It's interesting the reserves balance having got to that level, particularly from where we were, which is really helpful, but that we really need to be careful about the use of the reserves as we go into that budget process, and not using them for recurring spend. They have to be very much focused on the council's financial sustainability, and should be used wherever possible to actually increase the council's income stream, or indeed around transformation that will bring service improvements and savings going forward. As our previous finance director would always say, you can only use your reserves once they're gone, they're gone. And Brian was very protective of those reserves, and Amanda does well to be able to continue that narrative. We know that there's still going to be areas that are going to be very that are going to continue to fluctuate, and particularly around children's social work. There's always going to be pressures there, particularly with our Ukrainian families and asylum seekers and accompanied children we're having to place and care for. Therefore, there's always going to be a volatility in that particular area, but also we are waiting on the markets to settle around the costs of supplies and services and materials as well. So while there has been an improved position around our budgeting, there's still significant challenges before us, and indeed we still have to get the council as a whole to a position of financial sustainability before we have the ability to look to invest going forward. So on that, and of course the housing situation as well, capital is going to be very, very pressured within housing going forward, and we need to look at a way of managing that. Everybody wants to continue to see an increase in the number of council houses built, and be able to see an increase in investment in our existing properties, particularly around energy efficiency. So that therefore there needs to be very close monitoring of that. However, I'm pleased that we are in a position that we can top up the household support fund. That has been hugely helpful to those that have been able to access that fund, and the financial pressures that our communities are going to be under aren't going to go away anytime soon. So to be able to put additional funding into that at this time, I think is really helpful, and hopefully will help to bridge some of the difficult times for those ahead. So on that, I'm happy to move the recommendations as in section 2 of the report. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, convener. Given the fact that yourself and Amanda have covered literally everything in here, I'm happy to second reserving the right.
Okay, thank you. I'll open it up. I have Councillor Spears, Councillor Bundy, Councillor Kerr, Councillor Steinbank.
Okay, is it okay if I ask a question of Amanda, Director of Finance? It's on section 2.1, number 5, the allocation of £250,000 from HRA to the Household Support Fund. Can I ask how you came to that figure and reserve the right to reply to you?
Sorry, that's okay. In truth, I would have to go back and discuss that further with Kenny Gillespie, the head of housing. That was his recommended limit. I'm not sure if you've got anything that.
What I would add to that is that when we look at the projected spend by January, we had spent around 97% of what was actually in that fund. although there was an extra £190,000 spent, awarded in December by council, so that added to the pot. But it's based on the projections, and the actual take-up of the household support funds has been significantly higher in recent months. The latest figures I've got are January. We need to get the most up-to-date ones for February. But the take-up, and that's to reflect the take-up in recent months as well as the usage of the fund that we currently have.
Okay, several questions. One is who qualifies? Two, what for? And I'm glad you mentioned projections, because I know being deeply involved with food pantries and food banks in my town in Grangemouth, the majority of people that are now coming forward are working families who can't pay their mortgage, can't pay their rent, can't heat their home. And while trying to maintain these basic three functions of family life, they're desperate for food. And I think it should be the aim of everybody in this room to make sure that children especially are being fed through these difficult times. So if you could really, let's get it out there how people can qualify for it, because a lot of people need to know that at this time.
Okay, thank you. I do believe that the criteria, etc., is actually on the council's website, but I'll go to Mrs. Algie to give a wee bit more information.
Thank you, Convener. Yep, the information is on the website, and it's heavily promoted in all of our offices where residents would go in. So, for example, all of our offices where they're going to pay rent or council tax or whatever it may be, all of that advice and assistance is available for anyone. And there is a service there that helps to talk individuals through how to apply, what it is they may get, etc. So that's available, and we're also promoting it through different venues such as libraries, etc. Our housing staff are well aware of it, so they also know to refer cases on. So we do our best to actually promote that. Thanks.
I think if you've ever walked through the council website, it can be very difficult, especially for older people, and busy working families have difficulty sit down and spend a couple of hours trawling through a website. I think we should maybe advertise it more widely and more simply, so people in need at the moment can know where to go and get that access to the help that we're obviously prepared to give.
Karen, just to say, I'm sure we had a comprehensive leaflet that was circulated to all members, and that people can apply directly through support for people.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. There was a leaflet available, and the other vet option that individuals have is also through our third sector. So they've also got all of the range of information and leaflets, etc., and information available there too. So anyone who's not able to go onto our website, there are quite a number of opportunities there for them to get that support and guidance and to get information on what's available to them. And as I say, that includes our offices, it includes our housing teams, it includes our libraries, but it also includes the third sector.
Well, hopefully arising for this meeting, there'll be greater advertisement in the press regarding that. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Bundy.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you, Amanda, for the very detailed report and for emphasising the importance of being prudent when in the next couple of weeks we are determining our budget with limited funds. It is right that any investments that we do make with reserves, they are to either generate income for the council or to help with the transformation so we can save money in the future. That is the pragmatic approach. It would be helpful, because one part of the report which you highlighted, Amanda, was the increasing costs in housing, and it would be helpful if Kenny Gillespie would be able to provide more details about that to members, if it's an informal briefing session, just so we can get a breakdown of the varying costs, because just now the figures are quite high, and I'm struggling to calculate that. Maybe it's just me, but I'm struggling to work that out when reading the papers. And then on the final point regarding the advertising that Councillor Spears was referring to, there was no mention of social media in that talk. I'm presuming that social media is being used, and it's just a quick question on the leaflets and the posters. Is there a QR code to go to the exact bit on the website?
Thank you.
I will double check the information of the QR code and come back to you on that one, but I'm happy to organise a briefing for you on that and certainly some information on that.
Just to say that some of that will be detailed within the reports that come to council next week, within the housing capital and investment plan. Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, convener. Couple of questions regarding the peer board. Do we know if that's got to be fully funded yet? No.
We will perhaps know more later today, because that will be subject of a report to COSA leaders this afternoon.
Right, okay. On the chart on page 106, and all the savings that's been made in the various areas, are these just from vacancies, or is it a combination of different savings?
Thanks, Councillor Kerr. So the chart on 106 is specific to police services, and my understanding is that there's a fairly significant tranche of that is from income savings. There is a significant vacancy savings as well, and then there is also, as we were saying, savings around waste costs as well. So I think it's a combination, but there is a high proportion of it is around vacancy management.
Okay. And the last question, it's on page 112, 5.6, when we mentioned the HRA. Do we know how many voids we have at present?
Convener, I'll get the most up-to-date information for you, Councillor Kerr.
Right, that's thank you very much. So I'm only mentioning that because the more voids we've got, the less rent we bring in, the less council tax we bring in.
Convener, advice.
Okay.
Currently sitting at 250.
Pardon?
Currently sitting at 250, down to 50 in the last 2 months.
Okay. Okay, I've got Councillor Steinbach, then Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, convener. It's going to 5.18 on energy costs, obviously a crucial element in any decisions made by this council. I'm just seeing that the full impact of this is yet to be calculated. Do we have a anticipation of whether that will be reported at the council meeting next week, the full calculation?
I think, I mean, what I would say is I'm flagging that up to see that there could be some shift in the 22-23 position once we get all the final bills in. But in terms of the position for 23-24, when we come to the budgets, we just have to base that on the best estimates that we have. So our energy team provide us with updates from across the sector on what they think the bills will be, including you know, some of the advice we have through Scotland Excel and things like that. There is a lot of uncertainty, particularly around energy. And so one of the things I was reading the other day was around with China opening up a little bit more in terms of COVID, that could have positive impacts on inflation, or if a lot of the factories come online, that could increase the cost of energy. So in terms of the impact of that, it's quite unclear at this point. So all we can do when we're pulling together the budget is base it on the best information we have available at that point in time, but that will be taken from a range of sources and a lot of sort of independent advice that we get from that.
So just to clarify on that point, it'll be the best estimate available for the budget meeting on the 1st?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, convener.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, convener. On page 107.5.1.28, it discusses the Falkirk Community Trust. I'm wondering if it could be clarified. In 2022, when councillors took the decision to bring the Community Trust in-house, was it recognised that it was going to cost the Falkirk Council £3 million? And is it likely to increase further than the 3.1 million that is now forecast?
And I think clarification is required on that.
Yeah, thanks, Thank you. So that's the balances that were the cash balances that were sitting within the trust. So that's a benefit to the council that's come across. It's a one-off transfer of the balances that they had at the end of when the trust was wound up. So that's a one-off transfer of that benefit to the council. So it's not cost to the council, and it won't change from now on. It's just a one-off that happened at that one point in time.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no further questions, we're happy to agree the report. Thank you. Okay, we move to our final item, which is the empty property rates relief, and we have with us Paul Ferguson, who's going to take us through this report. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Convener. Just to take through the report, that the background to the empty property rates relief report is that COSLA has for some time sought greater powers over local taxation, and the devolution of this empty property rates relief is the first stage of this being implemented in relation to the non-resident rates. As a result of this change, all the existing statutory empty rates reliefs will cease to exist, and each local authority needs to have its own scheme in place before the 1st of April 2023. The cost of that relief will no longer therefore be met by the non-domestic rates pooling arrangements, and instead will be met locally. However, Scottish Government have guaranteed an increase in their grant funding of £2.169 million per annum for the next 2 years in place of this historical reimbursement. Like most, if not all, local authorities, it is proposed the local scheme mirrors the existing statutory relief to give local businesses assurances at a challenging time and to allow opportunity for a thorough review. The Scottish Government have provided that funding, and that we believe, after taking into account the impact of revaluation this financial year, it will cover the expected cost of the scheme in full. Given it's a new scheme, it will be subject to review, with any proposed revisions being brought before members during 24-25. What I'm asking is that members can agree the recommendation in section 2.1 of the report, which are that we note the requirement to have this policy, agree the proposed scheme that's laid out in Appendix 1 of the report, and note that commitment to review the scheme after the end of the first full year, and any changes would therefore take effect no earlier than 1st April 2025. I am happy to answer any questions of members.
Okay, thank you, Paul. There maybe will be some technical questions, I don't know, but thank you for that. As been said, it's part of the devolution of additional powers to local authorities. That's something that had been asked for through discussions with all local authorities at COSLA. It has been handed down to local authorities, and at this moment in time there is no actual impact, there's no change to the proposed plans. It's just a transfer of the management agent right now, and a further scheme will be brought forward for elected members, and I would anticipate that there may be the opportunity during that to have input from members about how we would shape that going forward, whether that be a policy development panel or a working group. But I think it would be appropriate to consider that as we get to the point of bringing forward any formal review of that. But I'm happy to move the report as it is at this time. Councillor Bryce.
Thank you, Convener. Can I say that I will be happy to second you on this, but the important things here, and Paul and yourself have laid this out, is that we are not changing the current scheme. We're adopting the current scheme to come through so that you give people surety going forward. The other thing is doing a review over a 2-year period. I know some councils are looking at doing it over 1 year, but if you do that, then you get the potential of people submitting their forms later on after the 1st of April. So if you do it over a 2 year, you get a true picture. And I think that's a very, very sensible thing to do. And also, with it being 2 years, it means for 2 years, people know exactly what the system is, and it gives time to build that up and develop it as we move forward. So yeah, as ever, Mr. Ferguson, a very common sense approach to this.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. Councillor Spears.
Thank you. Page 126, 4.4, relief awarded time limited. We have various empty properties, both industrial and otherwise within the town centre and Grangemouth. Some of them have trees growing out the top of them, have the roof covered and half blown off, are inhabited by feral pigeons, which are causing a great stench to emanate from the building and permeates the town centre. We are giving these owners substantial relief here. What measures are, and this is the question, what measures are in place to make sure that they maintain it? Some of them are rather large properties, and if they were to have burst water mains, it would have an adverse effect for the whole surrounding area. And as you know, with the rising water table in Grangemouth could cause substantial flooding within the town and especially in the town centre. So what I'm basically saying is it's okay for us to give them relief, but they still own these properties. They need to have a level of maintenance on them, not just so visually it doesn't look bad when you drive into a town and there's trees growing out the top of a building, but they're also in a safe state for the people, especially who live in the surrounding area.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Spears. Unfortunately, I don't think the maintenance aspect is something that Paul is going to be able to respond to, but perhaps you could maybe just comment around the period of the rates relief that's given and the potential for the council to address that in the future.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. On the time limit aspect, it should make it clear that the rates relief goes down to 10%. Eventually after either 6 months or 3 months. So the reality is that these ratepayers are paying 90% of the charges. So actually they are encouraged to bring the properties back at use already through the purpose of that charge. So I think that within other non-time limited components, there is a chance for us to encourage owners of, say, listed buildings, for example, which have unlimited exemptions from relief empty. We can encourage them to bring it back into use. So I think that on Councillor Spears' point, the existing lease scheme does deal with that to some extent. We can't necessarily say that's been successful, but in terms of other relief schemes, we certainly can use that as part of the planning to actually encourage people to bring properties back at use that are causing a nuisance. We can do that through minimising relief to those cases in the future.
Thank you. Councillor Steinbank.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. I'm just pointing to 4.3.2, and I'm not sure whether this will be a question for Paul or another officer. It just notes that the Scottish Government will not provide direct reimbursement, but this included an allocation of 2.6.9 million in the draft budget. And obviously the previous 2 financial years, the figures were not suitable to compare. How does the funding relief compare adjusted for inflation this year as compared to the most recent year, which will be 1920? And also, how could the previous 2 financial years' budgets be adjusted to compare against that figure, or why is it not suitable? Thank you. Bye.
Okay, I don't know whether it would be Paul or Amanda that would be able to answer this one.
I'm happy to answer this one.
Okay, thank you, Paul.
Yeah, comparing our spend during 2018, 2019, 20, even allowing for inflation, that the budget provided is well in excess of what we spent in those years. The reason that 2021 and 22 were not relevant is because the Scottish Government gave retail, hospitality and leisure relief to a large component of the area. So a lot of shops, restaurants, hotels, etc., all got full rates exemption. So a lot of them either didn't tell us they were empty because they were not sent to do so, or they were actually trading along because of that extra support they got at that time. So the amount of rates relief claimed during 2021, 21-22, and to some extent this year so far, has been subdued by the COVID reliefs available to these businesses. So I think that's why 1920 was the last year used for this comparison. But if we compare our figures, we have never ever spent more than the money provided to us through this additional funding.
Thank you very much. Obviously, I have a few concerns about what the scheme will look going past, but when there will be a review open, I'm sure that will be the appropriate moment to contribute those concerns. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. As there are no further contributions, we're happy to agree the report. Okay, thank you. That brings us to the end of this morning's meeting. Can I thank everybody for their attendance, and I'm sure that you all now be desperate for your lunch, or in some cases nipping home to see if the postman's been.